Italian Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another interview episode of the Italian Football Podcast. My name is Nimatavale Ruzzari, and I'm really thrilled today to be joined by a recurring and a guest and a very good friend of the show, who I suspect is absolutely radiating with joy right now. He is the president of Campobasso and co-owner of Ascoli, Mr. Matt Rizzetta. We usually begin by asking guests how they're doing, but I feel that would be silly to do that because I think you're feeling really well.
Great to be here, Nima. Yeah, I'm running on fumes, but it's been an amazing past couple of days here as we won our first, hopefully, of several promotions.
For sure. I mean, that's exactly it. Because when we had you last on, it was just you told this incredible story of all the drama and adventure that you guys had been on since we'd last spoken, and you taken over the new Campobasso, and you were putting together a team with just a few weeks left before the season started, and you didn't really have anything there, and you guys have really worked so hard, and you ended up winning promotion to Serie D, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we closed the deal. I want to say it was September 11th when we closed the transaction. Our first match. The first match was September 19th. So we had 7 or 8 days. We had no players. We had no coach. We had no GM. We had no CEO. There was mushrooms growing off of the stadium's pitch. And here we are less than a year later with our first championship and promotion. So it's been surreal, but we have a great team that was working behind the scenes. They worked their butts off this year to put us in this position, of course, along with the guys we had on the pitch. And it's been a wild ride, and I couldn't be happier.
I mean, it's truly fantastic. The achievement, I remember when I interviewed you, was around that time to basically put together a championship, a league winning side in 7 days is truly remarkable, Matt. Like that, I don't know what to say. How do you does it feel like real to you now, or is it still like this entire year and this entire process? Does it feel like it's someone else's life and you're looking in, or how do you feel about this?
You know, it's so funny you said that, Nima. So we just got back from Italy. We went with a bunch of folks in our ownership group, and everybody described it as an out-of-body experience, and that's really the best way I can sum it up. It's just been like we're living in some sort of outside world where we're just watching this happen as outsiders, but then we pinch ourselves and realize that we're actually on the inside. And, obviously we were a small part of a team that made this happen. It's really been a dream come true. And obviously the cool part about it is that with promotion and relegation, anything is achievable if you put the work in and you have the right vision and the right team behind you. You can build this small reality into a big dream, and that's really what we're trying to do. And this is really just the first step of many that we set out to accomplish when we bought the team last September. So I'm also as excited or as happy as I am about this accomplishment and this achievement. I'm actually more excited about the future, because the future is a lot bigger and more ambitious than what we achieved this year.
Well, that's a great segue, actually, because that was my next question. What is the objective? Well, just immediately for next season, surely it's to win promotion to the Serie C. That would be Serie C, right? Because you'd be in Serie D.
Correct. Yeah, we already, we had been planning for all different scenarios. So just to take a step back, you'll appreciate this. This year we had 30 games. Okay, we won 28 games. We lost 2. We had 134 goals, if I'm not mistaken, scored, which was the most goals scored of any team in the top 5 leagues in Italian football. We had 10 goals surrendered, of which 5 were on penalty kicks. So there was really only 5 goals we gave up on plays that were, actions. And it took us until the last week of the season to clinch promotion, because the second place team in our league, Isernia, just wouldn't give up. They won 27 games. They lost 2 and they tied 1. So it made planning very difficult. If we were in pretty much any other girone, any other group, we would have had promotion wrapped up a month or 2 months ago, even, because we had such a strong competitor fighting, every week. They wouldn't drop points. So it made planning very difficult, because we had been starting to plan for Serie D in terms of budgeting and start to look at players and scouting and all that stuff a month or two ago, but you couldn't really begin to make anything formal because you didn't have any guarantee you were going to get promoted. So that made it was really a fascinating experience for me. And it taught me a lot just about scenario planning.
For sure, I bet. So, what's the 5-year plan for Campobasso? I mean, Campobasso, given the size of the city, the fan base, the stadium takes, I think, 23,000. I mean, there have been smaller clubs in Serie A, much smaller clubs. Serie B surely has to be the primary objective, no?
Absolutely. I think, look, well, our first goal was to win promotion to Serie D in our first year. So we did that. That box is checked. And then immediately, so we had a great celebration last Sunday in Campobasso with the fans. Then immediately, next goal is to win Serie D and get promoted to Serie C. So that's already what we're planning for. We've put together a budget that should be a top table budget, and we should certainly be more than competitive next year and be able to be in the mix to do that. Obviously, anything can happen on the pitch. Of course, the results are never guaranteed, but we feel like we're going to be really competitive and we're going to put ourselves in a position to compete for the league championship again next year in Serie D. In Serie C, obviously we have experience with Serie C. Serie C is a challenging league, so when we get there, I think you'll start to see, a lot of adjustments made, just in terms of, you're moving from, what historically was semi-professional into professional. There's all sorts of things you have to change in terms of the legal structure and the entity. So we'll do all that. And then, Serie C really becomes a multi-year plan. If you look at Berlusconi, what he did with Monza, if you look at Catanzaro, who dominated Serie C this year. If you look at, there's so many other examples. These are multi-year projects. It's very difficult to win immediately in Serie C. So I think you'll start to see us put together a multi-year plan to go from C to B, in 1 or 2 years. And then look, once you're in Serie B, we have experience obviously with Ascoli. With Ascoli last year and even this year, we had one of the lower third budgets in Serie B. And last year we made the playoffs. We had home field and we were 2 rounds away from getting promoted to Serie A. This year we're right in the playoff mix again for promotion. So, if history's taught us anything, it's that once we get to Serie B, anything, can happen. So I think that's the name of the game, and I think we've obviously put together, I think, a really strong strategy off the pitch, just in terms of monetizing new revenue channels that are going to help, put us in a position to invest more aggressively in the club. And the sky is the limit with Campobasso. And I really believed deeply in this project years ago, and to see everything come to life the way it has for me has been quite surreal.
Of course, I can imagine. I just wanted to just wondering, do you know what Girone you're going to be in Serie C? Like, the question I'm wondering is basically, are you going to have Catania in yours Serie D? Sorry, Serie D. Do you know what Girone you're going to be in?
So I don't think it'll be formalized by the federation until July, late July, early August. But with 95% probability, we believe we'll be in Girone F, which is primarily the Roman teams. Roma City is in there, Trastevere is in there, Abruzzese teams, Chieti, L'Aquila, who's going to be a really good team and has been in some of the top leagues before, should be in that region. The teams from Le Marche will be in there as well. And then some teams from Campania. There's a few, I think, northern Campania teams there. And then, of course, the Molisani teams. And we're really proud. Obviously, Campobasso is the most popular and most historic club in the region to represent the region of Molise. But there's also some smaller clubs in Molise that have done some amazing things the past couple of years and are actually in Serie D. There's a club called Vasto Girardi, which actually is a town of, I think it's like 600, 700, or 800 people. And they actually, started, I think, in the second or third lowest tier of Italian football in, prima, seconda categoria. And now we're in Serie D, and they've actually avoided relegation for a few years in a row now. So we're excited. We're excited to be there. We're doing everything we can to win again. We're not going to be bashful about that. We're not going to hide, from that. Obviously, when you represent a club like Campobasso, this is a historic club. They've beaten, Juventus and Lazio and AC Milan before. They've, packed their stadium, 25, 30,000 people before. So, you can't just put a team together in Serie D to to compete at the mid-table. They're expecting to win, and that's exactly the product we're looking to put on the pitch, and it mirrors the ambition of our project.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that project because I mean, you did mention Ascoli. Uh, will there be any cooperation? I guess. I mean, the higher up you come, the more interesting it might become for Ascoli as well and their players. I mean, now I'm thinking you're in Serie D. Is there any plans of maybe players, going back and forth, and you guys working that way with them with Ascoli?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of synergies. Obviously, when we started it, we had to start in the fifth tier this year. So when you're talking about the difference between the fifth tier and the second tier, which is where Ascoli plays, there's just not that much. There's not that many synergies you can leverage. Now, in the fourth tier, those synergies become much more practical. So I think you're going to see us do a lot with, the youth academy, the Primavera team, friendly matches, leaning on each other's facilities, doing joint fan events and stuff like that. So these are, look, Nima, the challenge this year was we just had no time to plan. We went in and we bought the team in September, and everything was done 2 steps after the fact. We couldn't do a retiro training camp. We couldn't, we couldn't really go out and build our youth academy the way we wanted to. So now I feel like the soccer gods were sort of looking down on us because we won our league in May without having to go through the playoff system. So we basically have a 2-month head start this year. Most teams don't start planning, as you know, until late June, early July. We're going to be in a position, fortunately, where we can begin planning immediately, in mid-May. So I feel like everything kind of evened out. Last year we started maybe, 3 or 4 weeks too late. This year we're starting a month or 2 early. So everything is balancing out.
Well, God knows you deserve that extra time. I mean, I remember when we spoke, and it was like a week away from season starting. There was nothing there. I mean, you guys, that's genuinely mind-bogglingly impressive, Matt. Honest to God, like in 7 days, putting together a championship side-winning team is just, I don't even know. I don't even know what to tell you. Like, kudos, chapeau. Like that's all I can say.
I appreciate that.
And speaking of Ascoli, they have a big couple of games coming up now. They're in the race to clinch a playoff place. How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, with Ascoli, it's been an interesting season. Obviously, this has been very different from last season. We went from the beginning of the season, we looked like we were kind of in the direct promotion zone for the first 5 or 6 games. Then we hit some bumps. We sort of were flirting with relegation for a little while. We had to make a coaching change. And then once we made the coaching change, we came roaring back. And the team's been good. The team's been very good. I think we're tied for 8th place right now with 2 games to go. We play Cosenza at home and then Regina on the road in our final 2 games. So I don't think mathematically we would clinch. I don't think automatically, rather, we would clinch by winning the final 2. But I think with all probability, if we can get 6 points out of these final 2 games, I think we really should be looking at a 7th, 8th spot in the playoffs. And once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen.
I mean, I'm looking at it now. I mean, because I love the Serie B, and I think it's probably the most interesting league in all of Europe, if you ask me. And my co-host Carlo makes fun of me for it, but I don't care because I love the Serie B. And you guys have got 46 points. It's the same as Pisa, Venezia, and you're and one more. You've got one more than Regina, and you're 2 points behind Palermo for that last playoff spot. I mean, that's a nail biter, to say the least. What chances do you give yourselves like to clinch that final spot?
Look, it's just I gave up on making predictions in Serie B a long time ago, just because it's so. As you know, this is probably the reason you're so
Yes.
fascinated with Serie B. There's just so much parity, and it's so every game it's 2-1, 1-0, 3-2. You're talking. You can't take any games for granted. The top table games, when you look on paper, you're like, oh, we're playing a top table team. This is going to be tough. You wind up winning that one. Then you look at the bottom table matchups you have, and you're like, oh, this should be an easy win. And then you wind up losing that one. So, I've learned not to take anything for granted. Cosenza's fighting for their lives to avoid relegation, I think for the 3rd or 4th year in a row in Serie B. So that's not going to be an easy game at home. And then the Regina on the road, obviously they just got docked. I think it was 7 points. So, who knows what's going to happen with that. Some of those points could be restored, and then they're right back in the playoff mix. So they're going to be out for blood in that last game, and that's Pippo Inzaghi's team. So, he's always going to have his guys ready to play. So we're just going to put our head down prepare one game at a time. And I think if we can get 6 points out of these next 2 games, I think we're going to be playing for promotion to Serie A again this year.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of that, I mean, I know you don't want to, like, I don't want to do too much. I know I'm very superstitious, so I don't want to, I don't, push other people on that. But let's just say, should you get that spot? Let's just play with the idea. How do you rate Ascoli's chances? And out of Parma, Cagliari, and Palermo, who would you choose to play?
Well, in terms of our chances, I think if you did the analysis, very few teams that have been ranked first in the Serie B playoffs have been promoted over the past 5 or 10 years. I don't know the number, but I don't think it's a lot. I think it's only 2 or 3. So ironically, most of the teams that get promoted from B to A via the playoffs are the teams that are not seeded first. So I think, just looking, and I think a lot of that has to do with the pressure. When you're looking at a first or second seed in the playoffs, the pressure from the piazza, from the fans locally is incredibly high. It's difficult to handle a lot of that pressure. So sometimes, we would be playing with nothing to lose. If we are Ascoli this year, particularly given how the season went, if we make it to the playoffs, that's a major accomplishment, and we can play loose. Our fans are going to be completely supportive. There's really going to be, we're sort of playing with house money at that point. And I think in football, when you play loose, good things happen. You need to stay obviously with the maximum amount of concentration possible. But if you're playing loose, like you have nothing to lose, good things happen. You don't tense up. Your passes are a little bit crisper. You don't have to worry about, yellow cards and red cards. And, there's just a lot, you play with a lot more freedom. So I like our position. If we can get these next 2 points, I think anything can happen once we make it to the playoffs. Obviously, if it's not us, to your second question, look, it's just such a lottery in the playoffs. I mean, you never know who's going to win that thing. Obviously, Cagliari, Parma have the Serie A pedigree, so they would be favorites. Bari this year has had an incredible year. It looks like they're probably going to be seeded first.
Yeah.
Südtirol is another example. They came up from Serie C their first year. They've this is like a miracle what they've done, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were in it till the bitter end as well. So I give everyone sort of an equal chance of winning. I know that's
I think that's for like that. If you watch the Serie B, that's the truth. Like that's exactly. I think anyone's analysis would agree, everyone would agree with you on that because it's so tight. But speaking of Südtirol, are they the team that have impressed you the most in the Serie B this season? And what other teams and players have impressed you?
Well, I think what Bari has done has been amazing. Bari obviously has massive potential. The De Laurentiis family who bought Napoli, what was it? Talking about almost 20 years ago now. I think they have a very similar vision for Bari as they did for Napoli, and I think they're proving that there's a ton of potential in Bari. And I mean, for them to come up from C to B and be not just competitive, but a top table team for basically the whole entire year is a testament to their ability to manage these clubs and, just how they know, to put work, their ability to put first class, product on the pitch, both, on the field and behind the scenes in terms of the boardroom and how they're operating the team. So I think that's been incredible. But look, I mean, Südtirol, it's a little team that had never made Serie B before. They're up in, I think, Bolzano in the northern region of Italy. And I mean, for them to just come in, I would guess they were like a top 3 or 4 candidate on paper to get relegated. And this whole year they've been flirting with, the top half of the table. And I think now they're in 4th or 5th place. I mean, that's just been a phenomenon. That's what football's all about. It's about the Südtirols of the world. It's about the Feralpi Salos of the world who just got promoted from C to B themselves. And it's about the Campobassos of the world that, are just, they're underdogs. They represent the people that never had anything given to them. The hard workers, but the people that when they do things right, they can achieve their dreams. And I think that's what football is all about.
Amen. Serie B has some amazing players and legends like Gigi Buffon. Well, what is it like to play someone like that?
Well, for me, it's surreal. I remember, just as a quick funny aside, last year, Ascoli, the night before we were in the playoffs, we were playing against Benevento at home. One of my friends called me and we had home field advantage in the playoffs last year. We wound up losing 1-0. It was a crazy game. I think we had something like, I don't know, 14 shots on goal in that game, and we didn't score once. And then Benevento had, it was like 2, 3, or 4 shots on goal. I have to go back and look. And they scored, of course, on like the one decent, but that's how soccer works. So my friend calls me the night before we're playing Benevento, and he's like, Matt, like, do you realize that you are 2 wins away or 2 rounds away from sitting in the owner's box with, like, the Agnelli family from Juventus and De Laurentiis from Napoli, and I'm just a humble kid from New York that just figured out a way to follow his dream and follow his passion, and that was pretty surreal for me. Obviously, we didn't win the game, but just that's really what football is all about. And then to your point about getting an opportunity to watch your heroes basically growing up, Gigi Buffon, Fabio Grosso, who's the coach of Frosinone, who just got promoted, and so many others, Daniele De Rossi, who was coaching at Spal earlier this year. And these are guys that I grew up looking up to, and to have a chance to be on the same pitch as them, basically, obviously being in the owner's box, not on the field, has been just a surreal feeling.
Well, speaking about being someone who's an owner or investor in Italian football, since arriving, what is the thing that has impressed you, or that you've liked the most about being a club owner in Italian football?
Well, I think it's the opportunity to build your vision and see your vision come to life, and the impact you have on communities. Because, Nima, as I have run businesses of my own for the past 13 or 14 years, and I've been an entrepreneur. And that's been probably the most gratifying experience, of my career, has just been surrounding myself with good people, watching, my vision come to life because of the contributions of others, not just myself. That's been an incredible feeling. But then when you take over a football club, that feeling or that opportunity, I should say, gets multiplied, infinitely, because now you're involving hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of people that are bound by one common, goal and vision and mission, and that's to win on the pitch and to get their club's values and their club's name out there, because it's really a source of pride and identity for so many of these communities in Italy. So that's been the coolest part. It's been really, effectuating positive change, not just on the pitch, but within the community. Like if you look at our project with Campobasso, it's one of the reasons I was so excited and so bullish about Campobasso from day one. This is the region of Italy they say doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And, it sort of mirrors my life story and my business, journey. It's kind of an underdog story. I never, had any gifts, given to me. I never took, anyone else's money. I did everything with my own, time and resources and hard work, and kind of built it. And that's really, I think, representative of the people that support Campobasso. This is a region that was never given anything. This is a region that lives in the shadows of its larger neighbors in Rome and Naples, but it's a region that has so much potential if things are done properly. There's about a million or so expats who are from Campobasso and from the broader Molise region that live outside of Italy. And there's 300,000 that live in the region right now. So think about that. It's 4 times the size. The region is 4 times the size outside of, the confines of Italy as it is within the region itself. And when you look at, and they're so proud, these people that are from Molise are so proud. It's such a source of their identity. I talk to people in Montreal and Toronto and New York and Cleveland and LA all the time. And if you ask them what makes them proud and what gives them the most, what breathes life into them the most, and what do they associate their identity with, their Italian roots and their Molisani roots are literally, at the top, if not number 1, number 2 or number 3 on that list. So for a project like ours that's really built around telling this story internationally, making this club not just a source of pride in Italy and in Campobasso and in Molise, but also across the world, for the hard workers and the underdogs and the expats and the dreamers like myself, that has by far been the most gratifying piece of this. And you have to stay humble. This is, again, I don't win any games on the pitch. My ownership team, who I'm really blessed to be surrounded with, we have a great ownership group that has supported me on this project. Mark Consuelos, who joined me on the trip to Italy, along with so many of our other investors, Gardner Elner, Pat Chauvin, Angelo Pasto, Kyle Casaza, I can go on, the Falvo family, Gary J. I mean, there's been so many, and I'm probably forgetting a few. I mean, these guys have been all in on the club. They've been all in on the club, and that's been the coolest part of it. And it's just, we're just a small, piece of this. Really, we're not winning games on the pitch. You need good people, obviously great players on the pitch. You need great coaching staff, and you need, of course, great people working behind the scenes. And then we just have a vision, and we're just trying our best to, execute on this vision to help, help build something special for these fans who deserve it.
That's a beautiful answer and so true. But on the flip side, what has been the most frustrating or worst thing from the owner's perspective about Italian football?
Well, I don't know if we have enough time on your podcast to go through this. But I'll give you a few if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, look, first and foremost, you're talking about the Italian system is just incredibly, bureaucratic relative to the American system. So if you're someone like myself who's just used to being an entrepreneur in the United States, it's just a lot easier and quicker to get things done here. In Italy, the process takes a little bit longer. You have to go to the notary to get every document, signed and formalized before it, means anything from a legal standpoint. So there's just the bureaucratic part of it obviously is challenging. The real estate piece is an interesting piece too. In Campobasso, we have a 26,000 seat stadium, but it's a great infrastructure. There's a great foundation that's been built, but obviously it was built, now almost 40 years ago. So it does need some upgrades in terms of aesthetic upgrades and the facilities inside, the locker rooms, the coach's office, the referee room, stuff like that need to be upgraded. And it's just difficult to get that stuff done. You can't you'd think, well, why don't you just stroke a check and, go invest in getting better seats or repainting the locker rooms or, putting new plumbing system in, but it just doesn't work that way in Italy. There's a lot more layers of complexity and bureaucracy you have to go through. And, you saw that play out in real time in Florence with what Rocco Commisso has tried to do to build Viola Park out there. So that's been a challenge. The other thing, and we've learned a lot, when I first entered Italian football ownership 3 years ago, we had no network. I knew nothing about running a team. I didn't pretend, to know the first thing about it. So we came in as a minority owner and we just wanted to spend time learning, and building a network. And now 3 years later, we've been really fortunate. We've built that network. We have the right resources. We know the right people to call on, to help with the team, to run the club. And I'm really fortunate to have done that. So that would just be another word of caution for anyone looking to invest in Italian football, especially, that's coming from America. Just spend time learning. If you go in there, there's been so many cautionary tales about these foreign owners that have invested, not just in Italy, but in European football without really knowing, they think just because they have money and they are passionate about football, they, know how to run a team. It just doesn't work that way.
No.
There's so much more to it than that. So my advice would be just spend time learning, spend a year or two learning, building your network. And then once you've put yourself in a position where you can do a better job assessing your risk, then I would go all in and, like we did, become a majority owner and take controlling interest.
That's fantastic advice, I think, generally in life, if I'm perfectly honest with you. Just, take your time out, do your research, learn, read up, don't rush into things. And then, that's great advice, Matt. Speaking of someone who has done that, I think is a perfect example of that, of having, and now has written history, is Aurelio De Laurentiis with Napoli winning the Scudetto. He has step by step systematically built up his Napoli from bankruptcy all the way up to Serie A and bring them up step by step into Europe every year. And now they've won the Scudetto. What are your thoughts on their victory? And of course, the south of Italy winning their first Scudetto in 33 years.
Absolutely phenomenal. By the way, also, Nima, we have a partner in Campobasso who I just wanted to make sure I mentioned too. I forgot to mention earlier was Gardner Elner, who's basically become almost like a brother of mine. And him and I are on the phone every day. And I didn't mention him earlier because I kind of forgot he was a co-owner at this point. He's more just like a day-to-day operating partner of mine. But
Cool.
I want to make sure I mentioned him and
Absolutely.
Matt Tartaglia, who's also been, and Nick Gennady, and all these guys have been such incredible supporters of us. And I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned them. But going back to the De Laurentiis family, absolutely phenomenal. And that's just a great example of if you have the right vision, you do things the right way. You have to look at things long term. When the De Laurentiis family took over Napoli, remember, I think, what was it, 2004, I think it was?
Yeah. I think it's around then. That's when they went bankrupt, I think.
Right. So, think about what they've done. This has not been an overnight thing. This has been basically a project that has went on for 2 decades now, but it culminated last week, which I was in Italy, when Napoli won the Scudetto just last week. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. But look, that's just the De Laurentiis family is a case study for how, if you have the right vision, you do things the right way, and you build the right team on and off the pitch, you do a good job of connecting with the fan base that really, like I talked about Campobasso earlier. Talk about Napoli and the connection that the Napoli fans have to the club. It's such a source of pride and joy and history for all of the people, not just of Naples and Campania, but also the Southern Italians, that immigrated, to North America and South America and all across the world. Napoli really represents them and their story. And I think the De Laurentiis family has done a masterful job of carrying that forward and breathing that to life in the form of the football club and the way that they've positioned it.
For sure. Now, like you said, they are champions of Italy, and they've also done really, really well in Europe, as have many Serie A teams. For the first time in history ever, there are 5 teams in the Serie A teams in the semi-final of the 3 European competitions. Let's start with Roma and Juve. How do you rate their chances of reaching the final of the Europa League?
Well, let's start with Rome. Roma, obviously, when you have Mourinho on the pitch, if you look at his track record in European competition, it's second to none. So it's interesting because on one hand, outside of last year, the Conference League that they won?
Yeah.
Outside the Conference League, which I kind of put an asterisk next to personally, I don't put that on the same level of winning in Europe, obviously, as Europa League, or certainly not Champions League. But outside of winning the Conference League last year, Roma has had a history of just not being able to get over, to the next level in European competition. And then you kind of balance that with Mourinho's track record, and his pedigree in European competition, which is basically as good as maybe any coach of the past 20 or 30 years. When you balance those two things out, it's going to be interesting because on one hand, you have a Piazza and a club that's been sort of, hasn't been able to win the big one in Europe. They've gotten close many times, but they've never been able to get over the hump. And then you have a coach that's now coaching them that has gotten over that hump many times. So I'm interested to see how that plays out in real life. I would not bet against Mourinho, so my money would be on Mourinho at least reaching the finals. And then Juventus, look, if they're going to take it, they seem to be taking Europa League competition seriously this year. I think there's still a lot of questions around if these points are going to be restored, deducted. Nobody really knows what's going to happen there. So I think they're going to put all of their eggs in the European basket and try to solidify a Champions League spot via the Europa League competition. So that's the one thing about Juventus, is that I don't think you're going to have to doubt their willingness and their enthusiasm and their effort. So that's going to be interesting. And I think anything can happen. I'd love to see Roma Juventus in the finals. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I can't remember if the first time we interviewed, I think you told me that when you were a kid you supported Roma. Is that true?
Or I was a big Roma fan.
Yeah, that's just what I thought. How mouth-watering a prospect doesn't Allegri and versus Mourinho final sound? And who do you think will win that if that happens?
Look, I think Roma this year has been more together. I think people are more supportive of the coach. Obviously, Allegri's had some issues. Fans have kind of been hot and cold on him. I know he's had a few well publicized issues with a few of the players. And I think that stuff really shows up and manifests itself in the big matches. So just based on the kind of feel and vibe of this year, if I had to bet, I would go with Roma, just because I think there's more good vibes than bad vibes going there. And that would be where my money would be.
Yeah, and also Mourinho doesn't lose finals. That's just not
Correct.
that's just not what he does.
Correct.
Speaking of another club that is also in the semi-final, Fiorentina haven't been at this level, haven't been at a latter stages of a European competition in many, many years. They've got a good draw, and they really should make it to the final of the Conference League. And and if they do, they will have done so playing a very attacking brand of football that's paid off really well in the cups, in both in Italy as in Europe, but not so much in the Serie A. I mean, why do you think that is?
What's funny about that is, what's interesting about that is, we saw it this year with Campobasso. We made it to the semifinals of the Coppa Italia, the Dilettante Coppa Italia, and we were also playing for the league championship, league competition, basically simultaneously. So every week it was league competition on the weekend, Coppa competition during the midweek, Wednesday. So it's like Wednesday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday, and these competitions, they literally do take on two different lives of their own. So the way you play in the Campionato, in the league, and the way you play in the Coppa could be two completely different styles. Obviously, with the roster turnover, many times you're playing two different lineups, different formations. You're doing, set pieces are taken differently and stuff. So I think that might be the reason you're seeing that happen with Fiorentina. Like just as an example, in Campobasso this year, we scored, I think it was 134 goals we scored in the Campionato, which was crazy. I mean, that was like an average of, 5 goals or something per game. Meanwhile, in the Coppa, we were much more defensive. We were much more counterattack, sit back, don't concede, especially with 2-leg matches, 2-leg fixtures. There's a way in our competition, there was the away goal rule. I know that doesn't exist in European competition anymore. So anyway, my point is just that you find yourself playing two completely different brands of football in those competitions. And I think that's why you might kind of see Fiorentina 1 and Fiorentina 2, Fiorentina 1 being the team you've seen in Serie A and Fiorentina 2 being the team that you're seeing in Europe.
Yeah, that's a good shout. How do you reckon? How do you reckon their chances are to win the whole thing? I mean, I think just based on the quality and the football they played, final they have to get there. But then who do they play? If West Ham, if they end up playing West Ham, I mean, if you look at that roster, that's some big names in there. Even though they've struggled in the Premier League, what do you reckon?
I agree with that. I think West Ham aside, I think that's the irony of the Conference League. We look at the other two European competitions, Champions League and Europa League. The Italian teams are sort of the underdogs when you get to a certain stage of the competition. So, like, nobody expected there to be 3 out of 8 and 2 out of 4 Italian teams in the Champions League quarterfinals and semifinals. So you're kind of looking at Inter versus Milan. You were looking at Napoli. You're looking at Roma. And all these Italian clubs that are in the semifinals, and you're saying, "Wow, like this is great." We weren't expecting this to happen. It hasn't happened in so long. You juxtapose that then against the Conference League, where I think it's the opposite. The Conference League, you're expecting the Italian teams to get to the finals. You're expecting Roma to win last year. You're expecting Fiorentina at least to get to the final. Who knows what would happen against West Ham, but you're so I think that's interesting. Like you're taking the underdogs in one competition, and then you're taking sort of the favorites in the other. So I'm not surprised that Fiorentina is there. I think we all sort of expected to see them at this stage of the competition.
Agreed. So you mentioned it already, and I want to get your thoughts on it because we're recording this on a Wednesday, the 10th of May, a few hours before my beloved Inter go up against AC Milan in the biggest Milan derby in 20 years, in a generation. I mean, what are your thoughts about this tie? How do you think this plays out?
I don't think anybody can honestly predict what's going to happen here. Like if you look at Inter, like we were talking a couple weeks ago, maybe a few months ago about Inzaghi being on the hot seat and the whole season was falling apart. And, now it looks like Inter is basically unbeatable, right? Then you look at Milan, just coming off the Scudetto, they're very well coached. They have more experience. I think you could argue maybe not these players, but certainly Milan as an institution has more experience at this level. So I think it's a toss up. I don't expect it to be one sided one way or another. I think this is the sort of thing that's going to come down to the second leg. It's going to come down to maybe set pieces or penalty kick or red card or something something that's one small detail. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this come down to PKs at the end of the two fixtures.
Well, you certainly haven't calmed me down. You just made my heart brace even more with saying that. Like I just see this going to the penalties, and I'm going to be there next week for the return.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I feel like the few hairs I have left on my head are gonna fall off as a result of this tie.
If I had to make a prediction, I would bet on Milan just because they have the best player on the pitch, in my opinion.
Who's that?
And Leao.
Oh, okay.
And I think, again, even though it's not this specific set of players, they have experience winning. Last year they won the Scudetto. The club has won in Europe, I think the third, fourth, or fifth most times out of any club in the world. And I think that stuff shows. That stuff shows through the fans, and it shows through it shows through the organization and management and leadership in games like this. So again, it's a toss up. Anything could happen. But if I had to choose, I would go with Milan and a nail biter.
Yeah, it's going to be a nail biter for sure. Speaking of, given that we've kind of touched on this a little bit already, dare we dream, Matt? Dare we Serie A fans and Calcio fans dream that the Serie A teams will take a clean sweep? Fiorentina win the Conference League, Juve or Roma win the Europa League, and Inter or Milan win the Champions League.
If I had to guess, I would say 2 out of 3. I think Fiorentina can easily win the Conference League. I think Juventus and Roma might even play each other in the finals of the Europa League. So I think by default, we're going to see an Italian champion in the Europa League. I don't, as proud as I am and as happy as I am to see all these Italian teams reach the final stages of the Champions League, I just can't see Inter or Milan taking down Real Madrid, or obviously Man City had an incredible first leg. I still think Real Madrid's going to go through, but Man City and Guardiola against Milan or Inter in the finals, that's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one. Look, anything could happen. La palla rotonda, right? But I would say we're going to see 2 out of 3, and I think the Champions League is going to be the challenge.
Absolutely. I hope, that would be absolutely amazing if that happened. Let's not, the Serie A can do that, given the disparity in terms of financial investment with the other leagues. It would be truly remarkable. It would be absolutely fantastic because let's remember, we are guaranteed a Serie A team in the final of the Champions League, which hasn't happened for many years. So that in and of itself is fantastic. I want to thank you so much for coming on, Matt. It's always such a pleasure to do these updates with you and see what you guys are doing and how things are going. If people want to follow Campobasso, and I think they absolutely should, where do they go on Instagram? Where do they go on Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff?
So it's at Campobasso 1919, and definitely, we're just getting this thing started. Obviously, this year was a weird year. We had to start in September. We didn't really have a good opportunity to take a deep breath and do planning. I think now that we've won promotion and we have a little bit more time to plan, you're going to see some really cool stuff come out of us. You're going to see great content, community engagement. I think you're going to see a lot of events, and I think our goal off the pitch is to really create a new level of innovation and a new model for how to engage with fans and to build something really cool that's grassroots. You can follow us from the ground up as this creature is being brought to life. It's it's very much, we get compared to Wrexham a lot. What Ryan Reynolds has done in England. I think there's obviously a lot of similarities between our two stories. I think there's also a lot of quite a few differences, and I think what we're doing with Campobasso in many ways is a little bit more impact driven. I think it's a little bit more meaningful. Our club is really,
I'm going to say what you can't say. I think yours is more legit and more actually grassroots than theirs is. Theirs to me feels like a Hollywood production. Yours is the real thing. I know you can't say that, but I can.
Thanks, Steve. Look, I take a lot of pride in that. I appreciate that. I take a lot of pride in when we first invested in Italian football, and I mean this, I had nothing but risk, to take.
Yeah.
We had no TV deal to fall back on. We had no TikTok sponsorships on our jerseys. We had no A-list celebrities back then. who we could call on. And for me, this was about passion. It was about my family. This was about, doing something good for communities and really using football as a platform to represent, people that, lived life the way my parents and my grandparents lived life, which was that they never had anything given to them. And that really, for me, was what investing in Campobasso was all about. So to see this all sort of come out, come to life, and not just win on the pitch, but also get so many amazing partners behind us, like Mark and Kelly and all the co-owners I mentioned earlier, and Steve Golubchik, who's been a great partner as well. Like these guys, it's just been, for me, I have to pinch myself. It's been wild, and I just hope the dream doesn't end. Right now we're dreaming, and we're going to try to keep dreaming for many, many years to come, and hopefully many higher tiers to come, because this is just the beginning, I'm hoping.
Absolutely. I mean, you're Mark Consuelos. I've got a quote from him here. He's talking about when he joined the group. He said, "So many people can relate to this journey, regardless of whether or not they're sports fans, whether they have Italian roots, or even if they have ever been to Italy. We all have a part of us that can relate to Campobasso deep down inside and can connect with this story of redemption." I think that's I think that's very pertinent to, it rings really true. It really does.
Well, it's true, and the thing about Campobasso, we talked about this. I think we talked about this when we first bought the team, in September. The team was about to go extinct. They were on the city and the region and the people of Campobasso were on the brink of losing football entirely. And when you're talking about how important football is to a region like this, when you lose football, you lose your identity in a region like this. So, if you want to take it a level deeper, not only were the people of this region about to lose their football club, but they were about to lose an important sense of their self-esteem, their identity, their hope, their pride. And, we just came in, and all we wanted to do was just restore that pride, restore that identity. And I wasn't arrogant or boisterous enough to believe that we were going to go out and win immediately. We just put our head down, we kept our mouth shut, and we kept our mouths shut. And we just tried to do the best we could to give them a good product on the pitch and to do the right things in the boardroom and to put the pieces in place to ensure a sustainable long-term future for them. And, 10, 11 months later to see us, not just win the league, but, get promoted and get so much notoriety and have this momentum behind us, for me, has been beyond my wildest dreams.
For sure, and we're rooting for you, and I know everybody listening is rooting for you too, because it's a beautiful story, and what you guys have done is truly remarkable. Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on, Matt. It's always such a pleasure to talk with you, and all the best of luck to you in the future.
Nima, it's always a pleasure. We're incredibly grateful for your support. You give my best to Carlo as well, and please know we're always here to be supportive to you and the show in any way possible.
Thank you so much. And everybody else, will be back on Monday for a full review of the weekend's action in the Serie A. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Ciao, ciao.